to Mindvine, a mental health podcast for everyone. Since our first episode in 2016, we have been sharing stories of recovery, engaging with experts, and tackling the stigma associated with mental illness. The Mindvine podcast is produced by Ontario Shores Centre for Mental Health Sciences and is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
Welcome to the Mindvine podcast. My name is Daryl Mathers. I'm your host, and today we're talking something a little unique to our podcast. So obviously, being a mental health hospital, there's lots of things that make this place run, and we try to always be a leader in quality and providing the best possible care to our patients. And there's a lot that goes into that. And today we're going to talk about, a subject that's kind of burgeoning here at Ontario Shores with two experts. So we'll start with introductions first, then we'll get into what we're here to talk about today. So we have Dr. Mary Chu, who's our research coordinator, and I got to make sure I get this right, knowledge mobilization specialist. And we have Natalie Lowe, who's one of our knowledge mobilization champions. So in case you haven't figured it out yet, we're talking about knowledge mobilization, and that's a big word that people may not fully understand what that represents. So maybe we can just start talking about knowledge mobilization and what that actually means.
Sure, I guess I can jump in, and Natalie, if you wanted to jump in as well, feel free to do so. But I think knowledge mobilization is not necessarily a novel idea, but it is essential in the research world because we need to kind of made aware of, what the evidence and the research findings and the knowledge that is generated from research. We need to make that aware, make that available, and make people aware of those findings. And then we need to get people excited about it. So we, trying to find, partners and people who are of the same kind of mind and interest in what we're generating. And then we will be able to make changes with these knowledge. And so that's, in a gist, it's awareness, partnership, and then changes based on the knowledge that we have generated. That's knowledge mobilization.
So when you talk about what that means at Ontario Shores, what are some examples of knowledge mobilization in action?
Well, knowledge mobilization has been done actually at Ontario Shores for a long time, right? And so some of the departments that are actively doing that is, like professional practice, quality, COD, and really is, turning some of the clinical evidence or, like the frontline knowledge and lived experience from our patients into, action items. And, that's why we have change ideas. And then, really measure, like the impact of, these changes that we make. So
maybe Natalie can add to that, somebody who, works here, we have positions in, number of capacities at Ontario Shores, clinical, non-clinical, everything in between. Why is it important that this is happening, and how, if I'm, whether I'm in clinical role or environmental services, like how am I impacted by knowledge mobilization?
It's a fair question. And I think that's the interesting thing and the unique piece about knowledge mobilization is, well, it is primarily, I would argue, an academic or research component. You find it in various different streamlines of professions. You can find it in project management. You can see it in CEOD, professional practice, regardless if you're clinical staff or allied staff. It is a key component that I think we're already doing here at Ontario Shores. We just potentially haven't identified it as knowledge mobilization. So when I think of knowledge mobilization from a non-clinical role, I think of things like partnerships, collaboration, stakeholders. When we begin to develop new initiatives or new projects or new programs in the hospital, we look at it as a collective. And when we look at it as a collective, we say, well, who are the people that we need to incorporate to develop this? Who are the voices that we need to come and provide that feedback? It has that co-design piece ingrained within it. And we do a lot of co-design piece here at Ontario Shores. I think this is just another streamline to do that, where you really can begin to look at things holistically and say, what's important here? So whenever we work on something, we look at the why, the how, and the who. So why are we doing it? What is it that we're doing, and who is it going to impact? So when we want to roll things out to an end state, we want to make sure that what we're rolling out is actually fitting the need of the people that are going to be using it. So whether that's a clinical practice or whether that's the EOS, those responses, those shared experiences, those voices and stakeholders that are participating early on, you're getting that buy-in early on, so that when it hits the audience that it's actually going to be used for, they're able to have an understanding of why we did what we did, what we're doing, and how it's going to impact them in their roles.
You mentioned the EOS, and that's the Employee Opinion Survey.
Yes.
And I think that's an example that we talked about before, but in this context, that people on Ontario Shores and our external audience, it might be a good example for them. So for those who don't know, the EOS, the Employee Opinion Survey, is something we do every couple of years, where it's a wide range of questions that really dig deep into the fabric of Ontario Shores. So your day-to-day life, as well as big picture issues. And I'm wondering if you can kind of take us through that relationship, what happens with the EOS and how that knowledge mobilization occurs to make the environment better.
Yeah, great question. So when we think about the Employee Opinion Survey and its relationship to knowledge mobilization, or vice versa, the Employee Opinion Survey, we look at it as a way to gauge feedback from our employees through qualitative and quantitative feedback. We work collectively. So at the very beginning of the program, or the process where knowledge mobilization is represented, is we say, yes, okay, we want to have an employee opinion survey so that we can gauge employees' feedbacks, we can drive strategic objectives, we can drive department-specific goals, we can drive programs and projects moving forward. That's where we take that feedback and encourage it to kind of influence those directions. From a knowledge mobilization piece, when we think about the collaboration and the partnership streams, we go out to the community in Ontario Shores. We start that early momentum where we can say, how can we get this information and the importance and the value add from the Employee Opinion Survey, and how can we communicate that early on throughout the employees in Ontario Shores? We do that through a variety of different means of representation. So we do an early call out for participants where people can be a champion of the Employee Opinion Survey, where frontline staff are saying, you know what, I want to be that subject matter expert. I want to be that SME where I can support my peers in understanding what the EOS is, how it can gauge their feedback, and why it's important, and what it's going to do for them as an employee and the organization as a whole. So we have that early call out for our EOS champions. We provide education seminars to them. We answer any questions or concerns that they may have. We incorporate their feedback to say, what are the Q&As that they're going to be asked when they go back to their units? How can we support them in having the information that they need to drive this forward? We look at other areas to communicate that information, such as the Current, our e-weekly, our Wave. We do multiple emails through management, non-management, clinical, to ensure that there's an awareness and ensure that people have an opportunity to share their voice early on, to influence or to potentially even just provide that feedback and that buy-in to say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you incorporated questions that talk about mental health in the workplace or work-life balance? So it allows us early on to develop something with our third-party vendors. So again, when you think about collaboration, partnership, stakeholders from a knowledge mobilization standpoint, it's not just looking in-house in your department or in-house to your organization. You may need that subject matter expertise or that external voice from that external stakeholder, which is why we have a third-party vendor that works with us to gauge those questions, to develop those questions with us, and it's completely, when it is rolled out, hopefully we've had the right collaboration, partnership, stakeholder voices incorporated, so that when the staff are required or asked really for their participation, because it is voluntary, that they feel that they have the confidence, the understanding, and the know-how to say, yeah, my voice is valued. And, as a result of me participating in the employee opinion survey, I can drive change. I can be a part of this change. I can start to see my voice in the strategic design and the organizational objectives in driving change. So it's really important for those partnerships and those stakeholders, whether that's within your small circle or broad externally, and it's really about just ensuring that you have that holistic view versus just me working in isolation and then handing you something, Daryl, and say, can you run with this and implement it? And you're like, well, I have no idea what it is and I don't understand the value.
Right.
It's about creating that understanding of value early on, and I think that's a piece here at Ontario Shores that we're already doing in various different areas. The EOS is just one that's a good example of it.
I just wanted to, respond to and how Natalie was saying, it's important to involve the right people and the right voices, at the beginning of the process, and that's because, when the organization, we have an objective, the objective of the EOS is obviously to hear the voices of the employees. But then, do they actually find that meaningful and of value to them to to provide their voices? That's something that we need to make sure that they do, right? So making sure that it is a meaningful process is for the employee is also very important, and having the champions to kind of mobilize your process and your survey process forward and making changes afterwards.
Yeah.
I think what we're talking about is you have the learning piece and you have the action piece, and the opportunity to be a part of that process throughout. And for somebody that's maybe leading change or knowledge mobilization, it's it's a model, it's a roadmap, right? And so you mentioned earlier about getting people excited about this. So I would think a lot of organizations, not just Ontario Shores, have been doing this for years, but maybe in a more informal way, where it's just been happening, and sometimes the loop gets closed, sometimes it doesn't. Whereas this model maybe ensures that that loop does get closed, that there is that feedback, the reporting, the expectations, the value add. So why should not just Ontario Shores, but organizations, whether they're like ours, whether they're businesses in the community, who can benefit from having a formalized model like this?
All kinds of organizations can actually, use the model of knowledge mobilization. I actually was in a kind of partners meeting right before this recording and they said, what we're doing at Ontario Shores with the knowledge champions and building them up and empowering them is actually the novel part of our model. It's just so everyone knows who our knowledge champions are. So knowledge champions, the way that we are defining it at our organization are individuals, staff members, can be clinical staff, can be non-clinical staff. They are, being trained up to learn about the basics of knowledge mobilization, and given the tools to kind of enhance the way that evidence and knowledge is being moved to the next stage, to influence change, to influence policy and decision making. And they we have a community of practice set up for these individuals at the organization. And so the novel part of it is that, in say in a research environment, knowledge mobilization is usually done by knowledge mobilization specialists, and there's a kind of a central hub of where knowledge is being processed and disseminated or mobilized or translated documented, through reports, manuscripts, or conferences, presentations, etc. But what is unique about training knowledge mobilization champions is that the process is being streamlined, if you would, because, say, for example, we have an advanced practice nurse in forensics. She is, seeing day to day, these opportunity for changes, and she is well connected with the team and be able to kind of, develop the knowledge and the evidence for, to inform these changes, and then she can then put it into practice, right? So like the advantage of having knowledge champions embedded in their specific specialty and their realm of practice is that they don't need to go through the research environment. They can do it right there, right then, where the opportunity exists. So that's our knowledge champions. And to answer your question, this model can actually be applied in corporate environment, in other healthcare setting. And especially in the mental health hospital setting, actually, because the knowledge, when you think of it, is not only research evidence or clinical evidence, but we. At Ontario Shores, for example, we emphasize the importance of lived experience and expertise, and these are knowledge as well, like from our families, from our patients. How are we going to mobilize, their lived expertise to influence changes and policy making and decision making, and that's important.
Just as you were describing that example of the nurse on a unit, seeing something that would benefit from a change and being able to do that and document it. And I would think there's some advantage to even employee engagement, because that would be that could be a frustrating exercise, being in a situation where you see opportunities for improvements, can't make them, and then they can't be passed along to the other shift or the other person coming in that day. Is that something for our champions that creates that excitement that you mentioned earlier, that opportunity, the empowerment, or what are some of the things that you're hearing from our champions about their experience?
We are at the very, very beginning stage, but I already have, talked with Natalie and, a couple of champions there, the early adopter of and in terms of leading some of these initiatives in their units and their departments. And the general feedback right now is that it gives them a purpose, right? Like when they are, when they are in their clinical environment, so many things happens. But if they're adopting the kind of knowledge mobilization mindset, okay, so it's almost like they are more attuned to opportunities for changes, and where is it that we can do things better, and then where do I actually find the evidence to kind of support this change that I'm hoping to implement, and then going forward that way. So it gives them a way and a tool to also communicate with our leadership, and with the evidence that they're collecting, they're day to day, reporting to their directors, and the directors, moving it through to the leadership, and it's actually a very seamless way, if you would, to kind of use evidence to inform change, and then iteratively forming the next question, and so on and so forth. So when you think of it, it's kind of like the PDSA model as well. So you start with a problem, you identify the problem or opportunity for change, and then you try to plan out okay, so where can we act, and then you continue with that model, evaluating, etc. So
when you say research, very much evidence, it's very much a research term. But in that example you just gave, evidence could be my experience on the unit, right? It could be what I'm seeing day in, day out. It doesn't have to be a scientific article that I'm referencing. It could just be what we're living. Is that right?
That is correct, and that is the message that we are trying to drive. Really, is like research sometimes can be seen as a very narrow scope of things, and like you have these very serious researchers and but like at Ontario Shores, I'm finding that we are actually looking at a very applied model, because applied meaning like you really wanted to have your knowledge applied into the real life setting, where you can see change and measure change, the impact of your change, right? So that, to answer your previous question, is why it is exciting, because we are actually witnessing, like how things are, like invisible knowledge, I guess, is being applied in real life setting and then influencing change. So,
for you, Natalie, as a knowledge mobilization champion, what excites you? Like, why are you involved, and what has your experience been like so far?
What excites me? So I think what excites me is this novel idea of knowledge mobilization. When I started, attending some of the webinars and learning more about it, it was kind of this aha moment where I was like, this is great. Why aren't we doing this? And I thought, wait, we are doing this. We just haven't named it. These key features in knowledge mobilization are really to enhance quality. They can really be leveraged to incorporate. When we look at Ontario Shores, we strive for excellence in our patient care. And when we look at Ontario Shores, we're innovative in our approaches. We're always looking at how we can be best in class with ensuring that we're doing the most current practices for our patients. And it's really an opportunity for us to move forward into that direction. I don't want to say that it is templated, step one, step two, but what excites me about it is this new opportunity to potentially refresh or rebrand what we're doing and actually give it a name. I think that, as Mary said, the invisible is sometimes we just get so into the doing of the work that we actually don't think of the broader spectrum of it, of, how many people is it going to impact and the large scale of impact that it can have. And the tools and resources that I have had access to through knowledge mobilization have added a new level of value to the way that I do work. So before, we again strive for excellence, but now I can almost take those tools and say, all right, we're developing a new program. Have I checked all of my pinpoints here in knowledge mobilization? I think of some of the templates that they've developed for you to kind of streamline your activities to make sure that you can identify those potential gaps that maybe you didn't have insight from because you haven't had that lived experience. It's that added professional expertise and guidance that I think can really enhance the work that we're doing and create more of a direct path in doing it versus sometimes our paths going like this, where you go, oh yeah, I never thought to engage this person. Whereas with knowledge mobilization, it's very clear to follow, and you can say, yeah, you know what, I want to do this. And I know that potentially as a clinical nurse working in this unit that I face this kind of a barrier. Potentially, who should I be identifying? Who should I be raising this question to? What are some proactive pieces that I can potentially start putting in and get that feedback and that buy-in early on so that other people can share their lived experience and say, I had the same thing on my unit. It worked here. How could we implement it here? So really, I think it's that sharing of information, that sharing of your lived experience, and ensuring that, we can actually give it a name so that people can say, well, what is knowledge mobilization? I want to learn more about it. Is that something that I could do within the scope of work and professionalism that I have? And I would say that it is a multifaceted, cross-functional aspect that can be incorporated in any department, any unit, clinical, non-clinical. So that excites me.
But even any business too, right? That's important to note. Like basically what you're talking about is a way to deliver excellent customer service, whether that is, in our case, like our patients are our customers, but sometimes our colleagues are our customers, right?
That's
And
right.
in the community, whether it's a restaurant or grocery store, it's trying to find the best way to do business and ensure that it's sustainable,
Yep.
right? Identifying it, documenting it, and sustaining it. Um, as you know, whether it's people here at Ontario Shores or in the community, if you want to learn more about knowledge mobilization, is there a place they can go? Is there sites they can visit? What would you recommend?
So Ontario Shores is actually one of the non-academic partners or members of Research Impact Canada. So this partnership has really it has been very valuable to us and for myself anyway. And I'm learning more that like our knowledge champions is valuing the tools and the resources that they're giving us. So Research Impact Canada is a network of 25 different institutions. Most of them are universities, and within these universities, they have their own knowledge mobilization programs, which offer a lot of different skills building and training workshops as well. So we also have access to those workshops and trainings. So if anyone is interested, our staff member is interested to learn more about knowledge mobilization, we do have that resource and connection to Research Impact Canada and the network of universities that we're interacting with daily actually. And we're also revamping the knowledge mobilization page on both our external and internal website. And my goal is to provide some of the resources and tools and some of the YouTube clips that are available. It's kind of like a curated resources that I'm hoping to made available for staff on our website.
Right. Well, thank you both very much for being here today. And sometimes some of these terms can be a little tough to define just seeing them on their own, right? And taking time to break them down and see how they relate to people's everyday work, I think really helps. So thank you both for helping us do that, and the best of luck.
Thank you.
Make sure to like and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Thank you for watching Mind Vine Podcast.